like to grow up when we had, no running water, no electricity. I guess it had been invented then, but we didn't have it at our house. And of course, the facilities were just a little outhouse out back down a little board sidewalk. And being from the Midwest, the first lesson you learned in the wintertime was to always be second. Let someone else get out there and get the frost off the seat. But anyway, uh, that regret drove me to start, I guess you'd call it a journal. But I just started writing what was on my mind and what I could remember. And I was up to like 300 and some thousand words, I think it was. And then my wife and a former employee, who was my ledge director, Christy Smith, she lives down in Florida now, is retired. Christy and my wife got on to me like butter on hot bread and told me I should write a story. And I said, I don't know anything about a story. And so they suggested about the congressional years. So I made two attempts at it. The first one was, dude, it was terrible. And the second one wasn't just a whole lot better. And then I got into this third one. And when I had it nearly put together is when you and I crossed trails, and then you helped me finish the thing on out. So bottom line, I'm a pretty blessed guy. I started out in this world in a home for unwed mothers up in Sioux City, Iowa. That's where I took my first breath, and was adopted by a fantastic farm couple, raised on a farm in Southwest Iowa. And I really don't think there's a better place in the world to raise a child than there. And the things I learned through 4-H and all the interaction with the kids, and of course, living on a farm, you learn how to be a veterinary, mechanic, and electrician, and everything that goes with it. And, ending up being personal friends with a former president of the United States, George Bush Sr. We got to be good friends. Uh, for an old farm kid from Iowa that came out of an unwed mother's home, God's had his hand on my shoulder for a long time. But as Jackie mentioned, there've been a lot of mountains to climb. And that's really what life's all about. We find a new mountain in front of us almost every day. And if we'll climb it, or at least attempt to climb it, uh, life's going to be a bit better. You're going to learn a lesson from it. If you slip halfway down, okay, remember what happens when you go on the next one. History's a great teacher. And either climb it or maybe go around it and climb the one behind it. But that's, I think, the way that God decided and made this world to be. He gave us free choice to do whatever we want to do. And we can make a choice whether we climb those mountains and have a good life, become successful, a good place for your kids, all that goes with it. Or you can sit on your fanny down at the bottom of the mountain and just rot and depend on other people. And we've got too much of that going on today, but I won't get into the political speech. But I sincerely believe that. And there's so many of these mountains that were ahead that I climbed that I never dreamed they were there to start with, and that I would ever get to the top, even close to the top.
Hey,
But
Jim.
I made it. And, I had a lot of help. And that was from God. I couldn't have made it without it.
Absolutely. Tell us a little bit about what was one of the biggest mountains you had to climb. I know you had an extremely interesting story about um, entering into the congressional race. Was that one of your biggest mountains you climbed, or is it something else that really sticks out?
Yeah, as far as politics and the congressional years are concerned, making that decision was absolutely the toughest. My impression of politicians was that they're crooks. And Harry Truman made a comment one time that he's been credited with, at least, that if somebody's been in politics and they leave it and they go in it poor and they come out wealthy, that person is a crook. And oh, Harry's right. And we got a lot of them today. But uh, I just, I had no inclination to get into politics. It had no interest for me of any kind. And being in radio, you try to stay neutral. If you got a story, you get both sides, you put it together, you let the audience make their mind up what it should be. And I just, it came about a step at a time. The first step was I was attending a meeting of the National Corn Growers down in Kansas City, Missouri. And after the meeting was over with, a few of us were sitting around kind of having a cocktail or two before we went to bed. Coffee, of course. Uh, but the subject came up about Congressman Tom Harkin, who had made the decision to run for the Senate, and there was going to be an open seat in Iowa. And the conversation got around to that topic, and as I listened to it, there was a gentleman there by the name of Verrill Bailey. Verrill was president of the National Corn Growers. He lived in Iowa. I interviewed him several times. We were friends. And Verrill pops up and, or I said to him, I thought, Verrill, I said, you've had won statewide elections. You're the president of the corn growers. You know how to do this sort of thing. I said, why don't you do it? And he turned and looked around, looked at me. He says, no. He said, all I know is corn. And he said, you know the rest of it. He said, why don't you run? So we had a good laugh about it, and we let it go with that. And when I got home from Kansas City, I discovered Nancy had been called to be in one of these so-called focus groups. And what they were focusing on was who should run for the open congressional seat in Southwest Iowa. And Jim Martin, he owned a lumber yard in Shenandoah, was head of the Democrat Party in Page County, and he looked at Nancy and he said, "Your husband ought to." And first time in her life, she didn't have anything to say back. But anyway, fortunately, she's not on here this morning. I don't think she can hear me. But we uh, we had a discussion about it and had a good laugh and let it go. And then it was, I think, like a month later, something like that. Uh, I was at, we had a group of cattlemen from the state of Montana. I had established an annual tour out there out the Labor Day week, and we'd take farmers from Iowa, and they would treat us. We would live in their homes with them for a while, which is an absolute tremendous experience if you've never been in Montana. But anyway, they were in Iowa, and they were coming into the Omaha airport, and we went up to meet them. And we had a little time to spare. The airplane had some problems, so we went down to the Red Lion Hotel and had a cup of coffee or two. And this young man comes up to take our order, and he says, "You're Jim Ross, aren't you?" And I looked at him. I said, "Well, how'd you know that?" He said, "Oh," he said, "I recognized your voice." He said, my dad, and that was a clue right then that no more crank calls at night. Nope, I just quit. The voice was that recognizable. But anyway, he said he and his dad had a conversation, and they thought that I should run for this congressional seat. And again, we laughed it off and let it go. And then I ended up going as part of the press corps on a trip with President Reagan, who was going back to the countries where I'd been in the South, in Asia, Japan, the Philippines, and South Korea. The Philippines portion was canceled due to Secret Service interests that they couldn't make it secure enough. And I wrote my first opinion piece, I guess, 'cause I never done that before. And I wrote my first opinion piece when I got home from that thing, and discovered that one person could really make a difference because of the response we got from that. And I don't know. It was just one thing after another. And the hardest thing to get over, to get back to your question, was my perception of politicians was that they're all a bunch of crooks. And I really felt that way. And once I kind of got over that and got into it and actually served time with a lot of good people in the Congress, the rate of bad politicians to good ones is just about like it is in anywhere else in life. You got a barrel of apples, you got four or five sour ones in it, and it doesn't make any difference whether they're yellow apples or red apples or whatever they are. So uh, that kind of went away after I was there for a while. But that and the situation that Iowa was in at that time, if you remember, Jimmy Carter was president. Inflation was 10, 11%. If you had to borrow money for your farm, it was about 20%, or for a business. The economy was, in the ditch. We had farmers losing their farms. We had banks that were closing. And I just thought, well, okay, maybe I can make a little difference about this. And I guess that's what finally pushed me over the edge to go. But it was a tough decision. It was hard to make. But I had some wonderful people that if it wasn't for the people, we'd never made it. We started with $0. Uh, I knew nothing about politics other than president of the 4-H club once upon a time, or and the JCs, and nothing about Washington politics. Also, due to what was in place at that time, I had to quit my job at the station because if they gave me time on the air, or the time that I spent on the air doing programs, if a competitor decided they wanted airtime, the station was required to give them an equal amount of time. Well, that had taken up more time than the station had on the air from sign on to sign off. So it's kind of bittersweet leaving there because the radio station people were a family too, and jumping off into this brand new world. And we ended up with, I don't remember the exact figure, 270 some $1,000, which was a heck of a lot of money in 1984. And we raised that a buck, $2, $15 at a time. I believe when it was all over and done with, it averaged about $17 a contribution. I had one check for $100, and everything was smaller than that. But people didn't have money, and
Mhm.
you know the commitment that they made to do that. I'll share with you quickly one story that happened during the campaign. I came in, I was worn out, and I'd almost made it up my mind that okay, this isn't worth it. Uh, I'm not going to finish this out when I get back to the office. I'm going to tell the folks that, excuse me, that, ball game's over. Thanks for your help. And they're all to go home. And again, one of these things you're talking about, and I believe it was a God thing. I pulled into the parking lot at the office, and there was an old pickup with four tires, which none of them matched. It was rusted, it was beat up. And there was a gentleman standing beside it, leaning against the driver's door in a pair of old coveralls, which probably needed to see a washing machine. And I really didn't think much about it. I got out of the car. I was walking in the office and he stopped me and grabbed my arm and picked up and he put something in my right hand and closed his hand over the top of it. And he said, I want you to have this. He said, I think if you get in this thing, you'll actually work for me. And he got in his pickup and fired it up and the blue smoke rolled and he picked up and pulled off. And I opened my hand and looked, and it was an old folded up, dirty $5 bill. And during that period in time, this had to be like $100 to this man. And I looked at that bill. I got some tears in my eyes, and I walked in the office and opened the door and said, okay, guys, let's get after this thing. We got a job to do. And it was just things like that that happened, Jackie, that's why I say that God helps you climb the mountains. He puts the mountains there too, I think, but he also helps you get up. That's just my theory. And that's how the title of the book came to mind as I was writing it.
Well,
About
yes.
these things, it just, the light bulb came on. Hey, this is what the title ought to be. So here we
Yes.
are.
I
All
love
this
it.
time later.
I love it. I
I
love
better start watching the clock like we used to do at the radio station.
it. Sure thing.
We've got a break for a commercial here in a minute.
Well, this is a treat because we're hearing kind of the backside of you coming up with the stories that you put in this book. There are so many people out there that want to do this, and to be able to actually put all of these stories that are inspiring, that have meaning, that have takeaways, that help people through. We are all facing mountains every day. Everybody does. And faith-based, I'm a faith-based person, so I think that guy that put that $5 bill in your pocket, in your hands, that it was a reason. It was a reason for him to do that. He needed to do that so you could go, okay, this is my sign. This is where I need to move forward. And you have so many of those in this book that I love to go through and read and get inspired by. And speaking of inspiration, Jim, let me ask you, what were some of the most inspiring people that you worked with during your tenure in Congress? It's a loaded question. I know there are a lot of people, but do you have any really that stuck out, that really helped you make some monumental decisions?
Well, first, I would say it was probably President Reagan. He was the first person I met in that category of people. And Roger Jepson and I flew down to Little Rock, Arkansas, to fly back to Des Moines with President Reagan. And this was when I was first starting out in the race. And gee, get to ride on Air Force One, and you're with the president, and that's pretty heady for a farm boy. But anyway, we got to Des Moines, and then we helicoptered down to Winterset, and went into Winterset, and he was there for the dedication of John Wayne's home, which was put on the National Register at that point in time. And as I recall, John Wayne's sister attended, and some of his relatives from California. And we worked together on several issues. President Reagan would call you down to the Oval Office, and he would explain why he wanted you to support a particular issue. And he always laid it out very plainly, explained why. And if you voted against him, that was okay. He didn't take anything out on you or anything. And later on, when Bill Clinton was president, I learned that he was a kind of an individual. If you didn't vote his way, he would punish you any way he could And there's one of those stories in the book about what he did to uh, Peter from Indiana, Peter Visklosky from Indiana. I'm getting old. It's hard to remember names, but uh, that was, where I kind of got started. And then, of course, President George Bush, uh, we got to be great friends. He, in 1986, I was doing my O.J. Simpson imitation running through the airport in Chicago to catch a plane to get home. And I had a little tightness in the chest. And I didn't think too much about it. I got home and Nancy, being like she is, she made sure I went to the doctor. And he looked at it with his old machine and he wasn't real sure that what he saw on it. So he sent me up to Council Bluffs. And long story short, next day I ended up in the hospital and they did a double bypass. And while I was there, at that time, Vice President Bush was in Iowa campaigning, and he knew I was in the hospital, so he wanted to come see me. And Secret Service says, no, we can't go over there. There's too many elevators. We can't secure it that quick, and so on. So he was walking down the hallway after giving a talk somewhere. And this was in the day when we still had pay phones on the wall. And he saw his phone on the wall. And so he asked the Secret Service guy to get the phone number for the hospital, and he called. And I remember this little nurse answered the phone, and her eyes got about that big around. And she's very cautious in what she was saying. And she said, Mr. Lightfoot said, it's Vice President Bush, and he wants to talk to you. And I said, as nonchalantly as I could, I said, well, I said, you think I should do that? She's, well, of course you should. And we had a great conversation. And I got cut on. No, I'd already had the operation, but then Barbara came to our house and did a fundraiser in our house for us. Actually, the day I had the operation, Nancy stayed with me till they cleared me out of ICU and she ran back to Shenandoah for the fundraiser. Some other interesting people, Bob Livingston from Louisiana. Bob's a great guy. He was chairman of the Appropriations Committee. We worked together on a number of things. Manuel Lujan from New Mexico, who eventually was Secretary of the Interior. Some of you probably remember Jack Kemp, the football player. He was a great member of Congress. Newt Gingrich is a friend still today. We have there's a lot of wonderful people that just it's hard to pick out, who was the best out of the group. But a lot of people work very, very hard to get things done in the political arena. And then I had so many people in Iowa that just worked their rear ends off. And I'll never be able to thank them. That's been 30 years ago, and it still touches me. And, we had like, they'll make Gutall, the banker up in Trainer. He was going to be treasurer, and I decided to ask him to be chairman or vice chairman, and he was. Mark Anderson, who worked in the office, and eventually we took him to D.C. with us. In fact, some of the remarkable people were Iowans that worked in my office. They're the ones that made it happen. You see a congressman or a senator get up and beat on their chest and tell everybody what a wonderful person they are. Yeah, baloney. The staff did the work. They're just taking the credit. And I'll vouch for it. And I don't know, Jackie. The list is so long that I imagine they'll kick us off the air before we get that far
No,
done.
no. This is great. I love that. And I believe Mick is actually joined on with us, right, Mick?
Yes, we
There
are here.
Well,
Doing
hey,
good.
man, how you
you
doing?
Doing good.
That's my note overdue.
Jim and Nancy and Judy and I just saw each other in July, I think it was when we were down in Texas for my Vietnam reunion. So it was great reconnecting after several years.
That's
Well,
wonderful.
he's Nick's a great guy. I hate to tell him to his face, but he is. I admire him. He was a helicopter pilot in Vietnam. He's given so much to his community and to the world, and he and Judy are just at the top of the list of good people. So,
That's
Nick,
amazing.
whether you like it or not, uh, you know,
We're
I
gonna
don't
have
want to get
to
off the subject,
we'll
but
have
I
to make
think,
our grandkids
huh?
watch this. We'll have to make our kids and grandkids watch this clip.
Yeah, yeah, cut it and play it over and over and over. But one of the mistakes that I think we all make, and perhaps it's because of age that this has become a realization to me. We don't say things to the people that we should in time. I've got, several friends I wished I'd have talked to, but before they, passed on. And I don't know. I just think that's something we need to do is if you like somebody, if they've helped you out, uh, thank them. Let them know how you really feel about it. To me,
Absolutely.
that's something, none of us do enough of.
Well, I think you made a great step for you in writing this book, Jim, because you are honoring a lot of people in this book that you worked with that made monumental decisions, steps to move forward. You guys went through the farm crisis and everything. And just a side note, Mick, thank you for your service. I certainly appreciate that. I used to work with Community Bankers of Iowa, so I've actually toured Trainer. Yes, yeah. And so they have one of the most amazing financial literacy programs that I've ever seen. And they are the what I call the Taj Mahal of financial literacy, which was fantastic. We worked with the Department of Education to create more financial literacy resources. They were a huge part of that. So thank you guys to that. And that's just one of the many things people are out there doing good, helping others, inspiring others. That's what this book is all about. That's what Jim Ross Lightfoot is all about. Since I've met him, we have gone through these obstacles that he's had, these things. He was adopted, he's gone through, he didn't know if he should run for Congress, didn't know anything about it. He goes to a town meeting and he blows everybody out of the water as far as votes. He got over half the votes. The rest of the other, how many other candidates were in that first town meeting where you were throwing your name in the hat?
Exactly.
There were
We ended up
five.
with about a Volkswagen, old age. We ended up with nearly a Volkswagen bus full of candidates in the end. I think there was six or seven, as I
Mhm,
recall. Uh, and that was, and most of them had political experience,
mhm.
state legislature or something of that nature. So, and one of them was pretty doggone wealthy. So,
This is one of the things Jim was talking about. He goes into a meeting, he throws his name in the hat for the first time just to see what it looks like, just to see if this is something he should do. Him and Nancy had talked about it. He gets over half the votes. The other seven candidates split up the other half of those votes. And he was the one without the experience, but everybody knew this man he makes sense. He's who I want representing us. And that was another, I think, indication for you. I've got Dennis. Feel free to chime in You raised your hand. Do you have a question?
Yeah, thank you. I just there were several things about your book that really struck me. I went to college in Sioux City at Morningside, so with that connection jumped out at me. Growing up in Kansas and then Minnesota, the AM radio was always on in the house. So whether it was KCMO or WCCO, always listening to a radio station like the one you worked for in Shenandoah. In 86, after I graduated college in 85, that summer, I was in Washington, D.C., working with Grassley, and went over and met with Congressman Bedell. And Congressman, I was there on the Monday afternoon or late that morning, and it was that weekend he had been out camping where he got bit with what became the Lyme's disease that impacted him that way. But very, very down to earth man. And whether you agreed or disagreed with him on the issues wasn't the point, and just seems very, very likable. My dad was born right in Elliott, over in that area, and in the midst of your district. And just there were several things. You're an adoptee. Both of my wife and I, both of our sons were adopted as babies from Korea. There was just a bunch of stuff in your book that I could connect with, and I really appreciated you. And you're absolutely right about Jack Kemp. At some point when he was running for president, I was no longer working for Grassley, but Grassley had told him, "Hey, you're going to be up in Northwest Iowa. Dennis will be the guy to drive you around." And Jack Kemp and I spent a day and a half, 2 days driving all over Northwest Iowa. And there I am, he's in the front seat of the car with me, trying not to get hit by a cow that was literally in the middle of the street, or right out over in outside of Ottawa, and went around the curve and suddenly there was a cow right in the middle of the street. But anyway, just you're absolutely right. It was amazing time, and those interactions with folks like Jack Kemp and Berkeley Bedell. I met you once when I was out there with Grassley, but that was a quick hi sort of a thing. But anyway, thank you for your service, and thank you for your book. Excellent. Thank you.
Well, Dennis, thank you for your comments. I appreciate that. You mentioned Berkeley Bedell. When I went in, there were, two Democrats, Berkeley and Neil Smith out of Des Moines. And then there was Cooper Evans, Jim Leach, Tom Talkie, and myself. And we had a breakfast on, forget what morning it was, Thursday. No, Thursday was a prayer breakfast. We had anyway, about once a week, we had a breakfast, and Neil Smith put it together, and it was just us Iowa guys. And the political lines just kind of melted and disappeared. We talked about, our families. We talked about Iowa. We talked about the things that Iowa needed. And when we went to the floor, that's the way we voted. And when Burke got the Lyme's disease, he had decided he was going to leave Congress because he thought it was too much work with the condition he was in. And the Forest Republicans, we had a meeting with Berkeley and said, "Don't leave. You're part of the team. You've done a good job representing your people in Iowa. And yeah, we don't agree on everything, but we're Iowans." And I think quite a few of us met with him alone too, which I'll never know for sure. But anyway, he made a decision to leave because of his health. And that's what's missing in DC today.
Exactly. And I still laugh with the story I'm about to tell, which I wouldn't tell in public. But on that Monday, I went in to meet with Congressman Bedell, and he stands up and he locks the door to his office. So I'm now locked in his private office.
Ooh.
And he says, "Now, I've been told you were an Eagle Scout." And I said, yep, my dad was an Eagle Scout. I'm an Eagle Scout. Well, the president of Morningside had talked to him, Morningside College, and had told him about me. And, this is, of course, 85 that summer, stuff going on in the news about inappropriate behavior of interns and pages. And all of a sudden, Congressman Bedell starts taking his pants off in front of me. And I'm like, exactly. That was the look on my face. And he said, well, you're an Eagle Scout, right? And I said, yeah. He said, what happened to the back of my leg? And I turn around and there's those bright red streaks running down. And I said, you need to go see the doctor. And he's like, well, I have an appointment here in about an hour with the doctor. And that's when he said, but I was camping this weekend and look what happened. But, again, he was incredibly humble. And you're right. You're somebody you could absolutely talk to. And you certainly have that same reputation. Anyway, thanks again for your service. Thanks again.
Dennis.
Thanks,
Well,
Dennis. And we're going to
it's guys like you that make it work. That's what it boiled down to.
Absolutely. Jim, I'm going to start. We've got a couple people with raised hands with questions.
Good.
Andrea, go ahead, please.
Great. Congressman, it's great to see you.
Hi, Andrea.
Although I feel like we've been talking a lot lately. I think we just spoke last week. And my mother is so thrilled to read your book. I told her she gets to unwrap it before Christmas, so she's really excited. I'm so thrilled that you put this group together and we all get to talk about your book. And one of the first things that I noticed is that a lot of your kids are on the call. And I think that was one of the first things that I noticed when I went to work for you, was that your family was everywhere. They were ever present, working side by side with you and with all of us. And I know Barbara Schlein, who was your chief of staff's on the call too. And I think Barbara and I are both familiar with a lot of members of Congress who kind of take a step back from their family when they go to Congress. And that was never the case with you. Not that you could, being married to Nancy Lightfoot. She ran a very tight ship and still does.
Well, thanks, Andrea. My grandson just walked. When he got out of school, he's right over here in a chair. So he's with me this morning or this afternoon, I guess it is. And by the way, folks, if you don't know Andrea, she is the world's best press secretary. That's
perfect. And thank you, Andrea, for.
Yeah, it was such an honor to work for you. I'll wrap it up. I know a lot of folks have stuff to say, but I'm just still so proud of the work that we did. Well, the work you did. I got to be in the same room for part of it. And so thrilled that we've stayed in touch. And I love you very much. And I'm going to get out of the way now.
Love you too, sweetie. You're one of those people that made it happen. If one for you, I'd never been there.
Hey, Jim, Lightfoot, this is Mike Johnson. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Hey, good to see you again. I was waiting. I've been listening the whole time since you started, so I learned a lot about you here. We had one day together plus a week that you hosted us up in Washington, D.C., my wife and I. So thank you for that. Certainly the F-16 ride was a joyful ride, and we got that. You're looking good. You've lost a few pounds since I saw you last.
That's all drugs and makeup, Mike.
Don't believe that in a minute. So anyway, thanks. It's your day. I can't wait to read your book. I need to get a signed copy or whatever, but I'm going to make that happen when we get through it.
We can
Thank
make
you,
that
Michael.
Yeah,
Thank
Mike,
you so much. Sorry, Jim, I'm going to intrude just 1 second. Michael, there is, and for everybody here, there is in the chat 2 links. There's one to leave a review for his book, as well as one to buy now. So if you haven't purchased, feel free to go up in the chat box. You can see those 2 links available. And we do have another raised hand I want to get to here. If you had a question, sir?
Yeah, this is Joe Herdlicka. Jim, great to see you. You're looking awesome.
My goodness, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Just I was a district staffer for Jim out of the Ottumwa office, and Jim, working for you was it was. I feel like it was a lot like what we need right now because I remember bringing you into Ottumwa, bringing you into the office, and as you well know, there were a lot of Democrats in Wapello County, but they loved the fact that you would come and talk to them about issues. And I think in the last election we won Wapello County, if I'm not
Yeah.
mistaken.
Yeah.
So I just that's kind of my reflection is we could use more yous in today's
Oh, thank you.
politics.
Well, thank you. Thanks for all the work that you did too. I mean, once over in Eastern Iowa was a bit like Tom was very predominantly Democrat. And a lot of people thought, oh Lord, this guy ain't going to do anything for us. And the first thing we tried to do was get the word on the street that we don't care what your voter ID card says. We work for everybody. You're paying my salary. That's what I'm supposed to do. And once people started to catch on to that, our office started to get busy, and that's I thought that's what the job was supposed to be. And you know, politics was for the election, and once the election was over, you're supposed to go to work and work for the nation. And just because people had different opinions, they certainly had no excuse to hate each other. They should work together because if you got an idea, I've got an opposite one. Many times we sit down and talk about that thing, and we come up with the best of both of us' ideas, and the third option is better. But that's not happening today, and it troubles me for my kids and my grandkids. Hatred has replaced respect and love. And if anything, we just need to put some respect back in society.
Amen.
Amen to that. Amen to that.
Yep,
And
couldn't agree
Tom,
more.
yeah. Tom, you have your hand raised there. Do you have a question or comment?
You bet. Good afternoon, Jim. Tom Brand here. I grew up listening to Jim on KMA radio along with Creighton Canal. And I remember as a young man hearing the news that he was going to run for Congress, and it was mixed emotions. One, we're going to be losing one of our beloved voices of farm broadcasters on the air. But two, the excitement that it felt like it was one of us from a rural area that was running for Congress. Jim, I was recalling in a chat with Ken Root, another farm broadcaster who was on here earlier. I remember being in the studio once whenever I was at KMA, and you were serving in Congress, and you stopped in, and Andy Anderson loved holding court at the radio station, the station manager, and he made the remark that he said Jim Ross could talk about a pencil for 10 minutes and keep the conversation interesting. And I always thought that. And I thought he was exactly right. I still think that's the case today. And it was always a goal of mine in broadcast to be able to talk about a pencil for 10 minutes and keep it interesting. You and Andy had a very unique relationship. Can you talk a little bit about that, and also how Andy took the news that you're going to run?
Yeah. I got but let me tell you a quick story that leads up to that. I moved to Corsicana, Texas in 1970 to open a manufacturing facility for the old Farmmaster Company that made gates and squeeze chutes and cattle handling equipment. And then in 1976, the Wicks Corporation bought them out, and it was just wasn't a good place to work anymore. So I moved back to Iowa and bought the old Zesto ice cream store in Shenandoah. And in the wintertime, I went looking for work. And so I thought, I'll go down to KMA. And they had Tom Beavers had left, and the assistant farm director job was open. So man, I took a job. But I told Andy, come spring, I'm out of here. I got to go run the ice cream store. Well, the spring approached. He came back in the office one day and was talking. He said, "We want you to stay on full time." And he shot me a salary and one thing and another. And I said, "No, no, I got to go back and run the store." And he kind of kept after it. So one day I gave him a number that I knew that May Broadcasting would never pay. And he shook his head, "Oh, no, no, we can't do that." And so I forgot all about it. And it was like, I don't know, a day or two before I was supposed to go open the ice cream shop. And then he comes back in the office and in his unique way, he said, "That number's still good you gave me?" I said, "Yeah, I guess it is." And he slapped me on the back and he said, "Good, you're hired," and walked right out of the office. I never had a chance to say no or anything. So that's how I got on being full-time again as a farm broadcaster. And that kind of led up to the situation that you talked about, Tom. Farm broadcasting, I think, was one of the most unique jobs you can have in the world. And you, of course, ran the organization for how many years?
A little over 12.
Over 12 years. You were head of the National Association of Farm Broadcasters, or NAFB. And it's just been, keeping up with those guys, Ken Root and some of the others, has been, I don't know, uplifting, I guess is a good way to put it. And I would answer your question, but I've forgotten what you asked. I've reached that age. I don't know what I had for breakfast.
I completely understand. I was just asking about, how did Andy receive the news that you're going to run for Congress?
Oh, yeah.
I know he didn't want to lose you off the air, but at the same time, he had to lose you off the air.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I did get this sidetracked. I was telling you about that pencil. We had a discussion. It started with Crate. Canal and I got along great. He was a great farm broadcaster. And we were having this discussion in the office one day, and he said, "Well," he said, "you'll never know what happened if you don't try. You always wonder." And that crazy line got to buzzing around my head for quite a little while. And so I finally, when I made up my mind I was going to go for it, I went in and told Creighton, I said, "Well, I'm going to try it." And he was happy. He shook my hand and, good luck and anything I can do, the normal thing. So I went up to tell Andy. And Andy kind of looked down at the desk and he's, "I'm going to miss you. If this is what you want to do, go do it." And it was a warm send off from him, which was part of why leaving the station was so difficult. There were so many good people there, like Andy and Tom, and Bill Selby was there for a long time, and in the sales department, and of course Jack Gowing when I first started in the farm broadcasting part of it. Dean Navin, Ralph Childs, the homemakers, the list goes on and on. And we were a family. We laughed together, we cried together, and it was like leaving a family when I got into this crazy thing. And it was difficult. And some, like I say, it was bittersweet. It's the only word I could find to describe it. It was really bitter leaving, but it was kind of sweet taking on this new job. And it dawned on me I didn't know a darn thing about it. Didn't have any money, and the economy was in the tank. And here I was losing a year's salary and at least, and man, it was fun.
It was And I love that you've got these stories in this book too. So if anyone wants to have an autograph copy, I did put the link to jimrosslightfoot.com, so you could actually order that directly through Jim. He can get that taken care of. Jim, I did have one. I know we're getting to close to the end here, but I did have one story request about President Reagan. Asked to tell a quick story about President Reagan and the Winterset motorcade. Do you recall any of that?
Oh yeah, very well. We
Very
were
good.
we were after we flew from Des Moines down to Winterset and a military helicopter, National Guard chopper, I think it was. And then we got in what they call the Beast, which is the armored car that we have for the president with glass in it about yay thick for bulletproof and so on. And we were riding into Winterset, and in the back, there's like a jump seat in front of the regular back seat. And President Reagan was over on my left. I was sitting on the right side. You always put the president behind the driver because that's the safest place in the vehicle. Then right across from President Reagan was Mr. Baker, who was on president's staff, and then I was facing Senator Jepsen. And at that time, there was a group called the Iowa Farm Unity Coalition who believed that a family could live and survive on 80 acres. And it just was an impossibility. And the reason that they couldn't do it for the most part was because of Reagan's farm policies, which that wasn't true either. And a little sidebar of that, Willie Nelson started the Farm Aid concerts to raise money to give to the people that were part of that group. And he's still doing them today at 90 years old. He did one here, I don't know, 4 or 5 months ago. I don't know where he gives the money now. But anyway, their gimmick was to go to a courthouse and place these white crosses in the yard. And they supposedly, each one signified a farmer that had been lost because of the Reagan policies. And we were driving into town, and as I say, I was sitting over here, and the president was looking out the window, and these people were chanting through speakers and all that sort of thing. And he was waving. He had this smile on his face, and he's almost like a ventriloquist. You couldn't hardly see his lips move. And pardon me, folks, we're going to use a little language here, but he's just smile and wave at the sons of bitches. And that was the first time I'd been with the president of the United States, and I thought, okay, this guy's okay. He's going to make this work. But there's a few other stories like that too. I didn't put in the book, but that was in the very beginning, and then at the dedication, he gave a speech, and man, he would, bragging on me. I never had this happen before. This is a whole new world to me. He was telling people, what a great guy I was and what a congressman I'd make, and that, we had a lot in common because we'd both worked in radio. If you remember, he worked at WHO for a number of years, but Reagan was just I don't know. He was a good man. That's the best way I know to describe him.
Very good. Very good. Thank you. Does anyone have any other questions or comments? Mick, sure. Yeah, go ahead.
Just a story that goes clear back to the beginning too, and being involved in the first campaign. But I was sitting at my desk in my bank, and I was working on something, had my head down, and I heard a knock at my door on the door frame. And I look up, and there's a man standing there in a white shirt and tie and dark suit. And I look up and think, who in the world is that guy? And for years, I had woken up every morning at 5:30 or 6:30 or whenever I got up back in those days, and listened to Jim Ross Lightfoot on the telephone or on the KMA radio. And I look up and I have no idea who this guy is. And all at once he says in his voice, "Hey, Mick, I was told I should stop and talk to you." And I immediately knew it was him
It's
because
20
of
o'clock.
Chris. But I think that's just the way so many of us probably on here today remember hearing him on the radio, and that, and like I teased everybody, he had a face only for radio and a voice only for radio. It's good look. I think that.
I love it.
Yeah.
Thanks for
Yeah,
sharing.
thanks, Dave. We've been great friends for years, and that was where it started, right there. And I appreciate all you and Judy have done. My goodness, we've been down a couple of rough roads together, and we got a lot of good stuff done. So I guess we can say we climbed a mountain or two. I know you climbed a bunch of them, raising money for me. Because there just wasn't any out there to raise.
Well, this has been wonderful, guys. Thank you so much for sharing. Jim Ross Lightfoot, you are an amazing person, an inspiration to so many around, down to earth. And I'm so excited we have this book available now to share the message, and climbing mountains with God. I do have that link again if you want to check that out. And if you want to help Jim out, leave a review there's a link in the chat box to leave a review about this. Give it leave an honest review, give the stars, and help him out so he can get that visibility out there. That is a great way to show, hey, this is a great book. You should read it. Because it has so much in it. It has so much inspiration, and so many people are inspired by this. So with that, does anyone have any other questions? Or Jim, do you have any closing comments?
Well, I just want to thank everybody that's on today. It's been fun to catch up, to see Mick and Andrea and Mike. And I remember Mike when we hit the bombing range in the F-16 was quite an experience. It was a lot of fun. Pulled a lot of G's too. But anyway, just so many great people have really made it happen. It's been a wonderful experience. One guy who wasn't around at that time, who was helping make it a great experience, is a fellow named Will Lightfoot. And he just got out of school. Come over and say hi to the folks, Will.
Hello.
Hi.
But here, send him a laugh. That's what he normally does. We're pretty good pals. And, this was like, I want this guy to know that there's mountains out there and that you got to climb them. And if you don't, life ain't going to be much good. But if you do, the view from the top is pretty doggone nice. And what do you see? Another mountain to climb. And you go climb that one too. And that's what it's all about. And thank you all very much for being on here. And Jackie, you've been tremendous. Folks, Jackie and I, as she mentioned earlier, kind of got together by accident. But she has a great business with Dream to Author, and my stupid phone just rang.
Got it.
And, and Will got it. So see, that's what these good kids are for. I don't understand all this stuff about all of it. But anyway, that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
I love it.
Thank you, Jackie. Thanks to all the folks for being with us today. This was fun.
Thank you, everyone, for joining. This is fantastic. And Jim, congratulations again.
Thank you, and thank you for all the work you've done. And let's hope we sell a few. If we make enough money off of them, I'm going to make a contribution to the Florence Crittenden home where I first breathed life up in Sioux City, and the other half I'm going to give to what's now called Children's Square in Council Bluffs, because that was my route to a good life. I went from Crittenden home to what at that time was called a Christian home in Council Bluffs. It's now called Children's Square. And that's a little payback for some people that I hope they think they did a great job. I sure think they did.
Absolutely. Well, thank you again, everyone, for joining. If you have any questions, please click on the link. You can reach out to Jim. And actually, they can get a hold of you through your website, right? That JimRossLightfoot.com.
Yes, ma'am. Yep.
So
JRL@JimRossLightfoot.com, all one big long word.
yes, and the link is in the chat box, but if you click on that before we go, so you've got it on hand, you can reach out to him, get an autographed copy of this amazing, inspiring book, and we will hopefully be seeing Jim on a number of these events and interviews talking about his story. So thanks again, everyone. I hope you have a fantastic day.
Thank you, Jackie.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thanks,
everybody.
Jim. Thanks.